Dak, do you ever hear Dak get criticized anymore?
No.
It's like there's something weird where it's like we'll sit up here all day and bash a quarterback who's only played 1 year in the league, and then we'll put Justin Fields under a microscope. We'll put Kirk Cousins under a microscope. We'll put Trevor Lawrence or
even Mac Jones,
Jacoby Brissett, Mac Jones under a microscope. But Dak Prescott can play horrible, some of the worst football I've ever seen versus the Texans, and then get bailed out on a last-minute drive. It's like, no, Dak Prescott played terrible in this game. He was keeping the Texans in this game through some of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. And even the announcers, like you mentioned, they brought up that play, but it's like all of his interceptions, they're like, oh, well, that wasn't his fault. But I mentioned this last week. If the Cowboys are in a close game in the playoffs, I don't think they can win. You compared them to the Buffalo Bills, and it's like the Cowboys, sure, they rolled a lot of bad teams, and they went to Minnesota and rolled them. Definitely a lot of matchup problems. Minnesota's line's struggling right now. So when you can just dominate a team with your pass rush, that's fine. But what happens when you face Philadelphia that has the best offensive line in the league? Lane Johnson hasn't given up a sack in 2 years. So it's like you're going up against that team. You're going up against the 49ers, who have the best offensive line in the league. Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle.
Or even a Red Hot Lions.
You have Tony Pollard and Zeke and CeeDee Lamb. That's it. You can't compete with a high-powered offense, and your defense isn't going to be good enough to win you games in the playoffs. And we saw this story with Amari Cooper in the playoffs last year and CeeDee Lamb and Zeke. You expect the Cowboys offense to be better with Zeke, who's a year worse, and then Kellen Moore, who in this game, I talked about Kellen Moore. If something's working, he'll go away from it. That was the story in this game because they'd start to get a run game going with Tony Pollard or Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke was actually really good in this game and playing well. And then he just goes away from the run game. It's like, dude, what are you doing? I get you're down, but you still have to stick with what's working.
I can hear in the comment section right now, it's like, they signed T.Y. Hilton. They're fine. T.Y. Hilton, who hasn't played really anything in the last 3 years.
Yeah. Dealt with 3 injuries last year.
I think the difference between, I made the Bills and Cowboys comparison last week, but it's like the difference between the Cowboys and Bills in close games, I have more faith in Josh Allen than Dak Prescott. That's obvious. But I have more faith in the Cowboys defense than I do in the Bills defense because Cowboys defense is really, really good. Like it is. It really is. They can stop the run. They make big plays. Trayvon Diggs, nice corner. It's like the Cowboys defense is who I believe more in a tight game. And that's kind of what kept them in this game because Dak Prescott played terrible. And I think you make a good point about, and do you think it's a Cowboys quarterback thing or do you think it's a Dak Prescott thing? Because I remember Tony Romo getting slandered every week. He was the 2000s version of Kirk Cousins. They slandered Tony Romo. Tony Romo was the worst quarterback in the NFL to some people. When realistically, you look at the stats, he wasn't that bad. He wasn't very clutch, but wasn't that bad. Dak Prescott, you see the game against the 49ers last year. You see this game against the Texans. You see the game against the Bucs to start the season. He's had some stinker of games this year, and they don't say anything. They still put Dak in the top 10. If Dak were to throw for 500 yards next game, they wouldn't even think about this game.
No. They wouldn't even think about this game, but it's like Dak never really has those games where he throws for over 300 yards, 5 touchdowns like Patrick Mahomes, Herbert, or Burrow has. It's just like Dak isn't – it's like he's not a franchise quarterback, but he's not a franchise quarterback. He's like – that's why I always compare him to Alex Smith, but he's Alex Smith with more turnovers, but he'll push the ball down. So it's like it's Alex Smith, but – he throws the ball in the double coverage. It gets picked off, and then he's been a reason why they've lost a lot of games. And I just don't have faith in him that he can win you a Super Bowl with this team. I really don't.